Welcome everyone to Elevate 21 in today's session entitled How Mature is Procurement in Your Organization? I'm Scott Song, Chief Operating Officer at Spalding Ridge, and with me today are two very special guests from Koopa Software. We have Michael Van Koolen, Chief Procurement Officer, and Amber Zamlich, Strategic Sourcing Manager. Michael, Amber, thank you for joining us today, and we're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, let me go ahead and introduce both of you to the audience. So Michael is the Chief Procurement Officer at Koopa, the global leader in cloud-based business spend management software. He's responsible for driving best-in-class procurement practices across the company to support business development and be a source for peers looking to digitally transform their procurement processes. Amber has been a procurement professional for 5 years and has been with Koopa since 2018. She's a strategic sourcing manager for travel, HR, marketing events, and workplace categories. Amber also leads a special initiative at Koopa focused on sustainable procurement. So with that, I'll hand the floor over to Michael to provide some background and lead us into today's discussion.
Yeah, thanks again, Scott, and it's a pleasure to be here. We appreciate the time. We're here really today to talk about procurement and maturity, and just provide our perspective on how to get yourself through the different stages of procurement. Before we do, we just wanted to take this as an opportunity to just very briefly provide some context around who Koopa is. Koopa is a business spend management solution provider. We do this through what we call procurement, going from the sourcing of whatever it is that you want to buy all the way down to pay. So that's at the heart of our platform, and we call that business spend management. And around that, we have power applications to extract more value out of your spend. We do that through things like spend analytics, strategic sourcing, contract management, contingent labor, and how to properly manage that, but also risk and management of your risk, and all the cash flow that comes with managing your business spending. All of that is done in one single platform that is natively integrated. It is homegrown, and we are able, as a result of that, to extract more value through the power of community. We now have more than 2,000 customers. We have more than 7 million suppliers, and we manage more than $2.5 trillion worth of spend. And as we aggregate all that spend, we have the ability to anonymize the spend and provide it back to our community and constantly extract more value out of the spend. Another way to look at Koopa and what we do is to compare that to some other solutions that most companies have. They are around how do you manage your own customers or your own customers in a customer relationship management platform, or how you manage your workforce and how you manage all the people that you employ through an HRMS type of solution. And as we think about that, we are familiar with solutions like Salesforce for CRM, and Workday for managing your human capital and all your employees. We'd like to think of ourselves as the single solution that helps you manage all of your activities around managing your business spending. So that can be from your contracts, that can be from suppliers, it could be through authoring your contracts, it could be managing your inventory, managing your expenses, compliance, supplier risk, invoicing, but also just the pure procure to pay, the requisitioning to your ordering. And that is where Koopa comes into play. It's no different than, again, how you manage your workforce or how you manage your sales. So with that, we integrate into ERP. That can be NetSuite, it could be any ERP. We integrate with all of them. And that's really how to best think about Koopa and what we provide to our 2,000 plus customers today. So with that, before we get into some seated questions that we have, we wanted to kind of pause and really walk through procurement maturity. Like, what does that really mean? And how do you become more mature in procurement? The way we'd like to think of it is, of course, always value and time. Procurement is not a 6-month journey, unfortunately, and I've had the pleasure of leading procurement transformation in my past, both at Lululemon and at VF Corp. And it's a journey. It's not a 6-month quick sprint to the finish line, as much as maybe we sometimes would like it to be true. It really is a journey. And so what we're going to try to do is walk the audience through a journey of procurement maturity. If you look at the first level of procurement, which we call level 1, it is typically very transactional and very tactical in nature. So what does that mean is we often are thinking about things like ordering things, invoicing coming in. You may or may not do a 3-way or 4-way match of those invoices, or those invoices come in through some way in a PDF or even hard copy still today. And you just have to process that transaction that will likely go through an approval process and ultimately results in a payment to a supplier and recording of that invoice in your ERP. And there is some basic level of sourcing happening in your organization today. It's very tactical, very operational, is not very, very strategic. If we go to the next level of procurement, that's where you start to think about more sourcing. You start to think about your spend. It's like managing your checkbook is the best way for me to always describe that. So you'll have a basic level of analytics. You know where your money goes. You know who you spend money with, and why you spend money in the first place. Like, why do you buy certain things in the first place? So this is typically where you introduce things like strategic sourcing. You start to think about, how can I extract more value? And what you then typically see is, as you go through strategic sourcing, is the value that procurement brings, the cost savings, the leveraging of your spend, the better understanding of your checkbook. That's where procurement starts to immediately extract more value to the organization. As part of that, I will say, like, if you don't know your contractual obligations, if you don't know who you're contracting with, start and end date of your contract, if you don't know why you buy, how much you buy, when you need it, lead time, commodity pricing, if you don't know any of that, then everything else doesn't matter, because you're unable to substantiate and prove the value you deliver. So having contract management and understanding your commitments, both sides, right? Not just you to the supplier, but the supplier also to you, is really, really critical. And that's when typically in level 2 is when you start to have that visibility into your contracts. If you then slowly make your way into further maturity, you see that the value might slowly taper down, but that's when you start to think about things like category management. How do I really manage my commodities that I buy, or services? It doesn't have to be goods only. And what are the cost drivers? And what if raw material pricing goes up, as we've seen over the past 6 months, as the result of course, what has happened in the supply chain? Like, what does that mean to my own cost? And what does that mean to my suppliers? And what level of visibility do I have into raw materials, and what that means for me downstream in my own supply chain and my own cost structure? And what alternatives do I have, and what strategies can I come up with to truly drive competitive pressure and to drive a competitive advantage? That's what we call category strategies. You start to think about things like demand management. You start to think about things like what's going on in the global supply chain and how that has an implication and an impact on my own supply chain. And ultimately, what you want is, through real supplier collaboration, you want to drive top line growth. You want to drive innovation. And as a practitioner, the holy grail is to be a competitive weapon to your respective company. So that is in 5 minutes, procurement maturity. Okay, Amber, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I joined Koopa in 2018, and we were operating at a level 1 procurement. Our team was very small, and also Koopa was a much smaller company at that time as well. So any procurement operations we were doing were very transactional. renewals that were coming up, we were very reactive towards that. And now, 3 years later, we've transitioned into a level 2 procurement, which we're doing much more strategic work. We're working on spend analysis, managing our contracts, and really working with our stakeholders to drive the most value that we can with our procurement functions.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Of course, our goal is, as it should be, to become, best in class and level 4 procurement. And we're, to your point, we're in the midst of moving ourselves from level 2 to level 3. And then, because this is not a scorecard. There's no right or wrong. It's, please don't ever think like in that sense. This is purely a moment in time, and this is a journey. But yeah, no, thank you. That makes a total sense. So with that, let's go back to you, Scott, and let's get into some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I think the way you framed it is really interesting. Just thinking of this as an ongoing progression within the organization. Amber, I know you shared a little bit about Koopa's own progression, and I'd say whether it's with Koopa or just other organizations that you've seen and worked with in the past, what are some of the typical challenges you see organizations face when they are younger in their maturity curve, potentially, from a level 1 moving to a level 2? Are there things that you see as common factors around, having to be a little bit more transactional, a little bit more reactionary to what's out there?
Yeah, I think with that, the main thing that I think is the most important is to let your stakeholders know that if you're able to get in the supplier selection process earlier rather than later, you can drive the most value doing that. A lot of times when you're in that level 1 maturity, it's very reactive, like I mentioned. So, you have a couple weeks, maybe a month to get a contract in and negotiate those terms. But when you communicate to the stakeholder that procurement can drive value by being involved a couple months before, when that process is right in its beginning stages, then you're able to influence the sourcing process, maybe bring in some more suppliers to make a competitive event. That's where we really drive the most value.
Definitely. I think that's very helpful. And, as people start to untap that power and be able to, progress within the maturity, obviously the digital transformation component, is such a key component, right? Just being able to have deeper analytics at your fingertips, be able to make better decisions. And so for any companies looking to begin their journey, what are some of the typical challenges you see, companies face as they try and progress through the different stages of maturity?
Yeah, and I can take a stab, and then Amber, welcome your perspective for sure. I always like to think of things in people, process, technology. And one of the things we'll definitely share with the audience is a really handy ebook afterwards. But think about it, people, process, and technology. And I think the biggest challenges that you encounter is if you only do one of those 3. So if, for example, you're only focused on technology or only focused on the process and you forget people, that doesn't mean that people is the first thing you need to do and then process and then technology. I don't think that that's accurate, but you have to focus on all 3. So in other words, if you start with very transactional work and now you want to start to become more strategic, well, that may require either up-leveling the people you have today, or maybe you need a different skill set, or maybe you need more diversity in your people. But if you have that, but you don't necessarily have the right technology, then you're going to get stuck, right? Because you need visibility, you need compliance, you need governance, you need to have, a car to win a Formula 1 race, right? You need to have the ability to enable that through the power of technology. But then if you don't have the right process and people still have the ability to buy from whomever they want without necessarily having some structure around how you operate and how you show up every day, as a function, right? As a procurement function, then still it's not going to work. So it is all those 3. I've been fortunate enough to, like I said earlier, to lead procurement transformation a few times. And I think that to me, the key to success is to have a focus and a strategy around all those three elements. And that sometimes also means you need to make tough decisions. That sometimes means that you need to make decisions that are in the best interest of the company. And that, is not always easy, right? Because people sometimes do take things very personal. And it's trying to find the right balance between those three elements. But I mean, that to me has always been the key to success. And Amber, I welcome your perspective for sure.
Yeah, agreed. I think having a technology that allows for that kind of overarching visibility, especially with the past year with COVID, businesses needing to make very quick and very important decisions, and it's very beneficial when you have all of that data right in front of you at your fingertips.
Yeah, and I think you've hit upon a good part. Just for us coming out of COVID, we've seen so many things change around us. The global economy, people working from home or some form of a hybrid model. We've seen supply chain disruptions, commodity price fluctuations. The list goes on, right? And priorities on where companies choose to invest. So, how have the ways companies look at procurement evolved, particularly over the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I can take a stab again first, if that's okay. I said before, what would have taken us another 10 years for procurement to truly be positioned where it should have always been in the first place was now done within 3 weeks, and maybe exaggerating a little bit. But, and the point what I'm trying to make there is, I think companies and executives really realize that if you do not have the right visibility, the right controls in place, the ability to truly understand tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and the reliance on all those moving parts. If you didn't really have that, then you were in a lot of trouble. And I think a lot of companies still are today in a lot of trouble as a result of not having that level of procurement. And so procurement has really got catapulted into the executive room. I've spoken to tons and tons of practitioners. They've all said the same thing. I know there's lots of publication out there as well, but I speak with procurement leaders every day of the week of some of the biggest companies in the world, and the messaging is very consistent. I think everybody's saying the same thing. We're in the seats. We're at the table. We've been wanting to get there. We were now there, whether we wanted it or not. And I always, would like to think that we always wanted it. But now that we're there, the next challenge is, how do we stay there, right? How do we not just, go back to the old days where procurement was in the basement and was considered more tactical and operational, of like, oh, it's those guys running RFPs and I'll come back to you 2.5 years from now when that contract is up for renewal, right? That's not where procurement should have been in the first place. But how do we stay at that seat? How do we stay relevant? And the only way that we stay relevant is if we have the ability to constantly provide value to our organization. So, I think everybody looks at procurement very differently today, but we got to stay there. And in order to stay there, we have to constantly extract more value. And we do that through the power of people, process, and technology, for sure. And I think the biggest challenge is to kind of answer the second part of your question. And then Amber, welcome the feedback. Is, the biggest challenge that we have today is, where is this going to end, right? Where's the supply chain going? You see raw material prices going all over the place, whether it's wood, palladium, gold, semiconductors. Disruption is everywhere. I don't think we've seen the end of that. And being in an environment like that where things are so fluid, I think that's the biggest challenge today.
And I totally agree. I think, like you said, this past year has allowed procurement to be a little bit more visible and help stakeholders and executives make those decisions that needed to be made. And I think, just like you said, that the value that procurement can bring is huge. It's just a matter of the stakeholders knowing that and trusting that we can, bring value to the table and help with these big decisions. I think it was a good way for procurement to kind of get brought into the light, and then we can, continue bringing value.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been super helpful. And when we think of the changing landscape, just hear about the word strategic and the words value, right? And so really being able to drive that, and value, I think, comes in a lot of different forms. There's the aspect of timing, there's the aspect of cost savings, just deeper analytics, and being able to see that process through. I know, Amber, you were or you are involved in an internal initiative within Coupa, just in terms of from an ESG standpoint. So, for those who might not be familiar, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. I know that that's been a growing point of emphasis in the business world, both in how we invest. You see a resurgence of that even in investing in companies in the stock market, but also just how companies evaluate vendors and suppliers, through the procurement process. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing today, and things that you're doing inside the walls of Coupa to help make an impact.
Yeah, definitely. So like you said, ESG is a huge topic right now across the board. So what we've been doing, there's kind of two parts to this. So on the Coupa kind of product side, I know that there's been a lot of effort in kind of making ESG a part of that product so that companies can utilize that and use that data to help their programs progress. So that's really awesome. And of course, we use that in-house. So what we've been doing internally, the past year, we've developed an ESG program. And that part of that is sustainable procurement, which is what I'm supporting. So what we've done is we've created metrics and targets that we're trying to hit for this year and years to follow. And a big focus is supplier diversity. So this past year, we've done a really great job of kind of understanding the baseline of what suppliers we have in our current portfolio. And then what we want to do is make an effort to include diverse suppliers in our sourcing events so that we can kind of drive spend towards diverse suppliers and make an impact that way. So that's what we've been doing. We've made a lot of progress. We have a lot of work to do still, but it's very special to be on that team. I enjoy that work very much. And I think we will make some very good strides in the next couple of years.
That's really exciting news. And I know that that's such an impactful way forward, right? And a lens that a lot of organizations can look at. So final question I have for today is really, okay, so, we talked about the maturity curve. We talked about, the strategic nature of procurement and how, the role of procurement as a function has evolved over time. So for organizations who are looking to take that first step, take that first movement forward, there's a lot of areas, to look at. So, there's so many places to start, whether it's sourcing, invoicing, digital pay. What advice would you give to companies who are at the beginning of the journey, and where should they begin?
Yeah, I'd say if I can chime in here, I think the first thing that you always need to do is create alignment. It sounds very simple, but that's often where things get kind of, hairy and kind of painful, is if there's a lack of real understanding of what procurement is, but maybe more importantly, what it's not. And what I mean with that is if you have cross-functional alignment between business, IT, finance, the CEO, and the executive suite, and you really have the ability to explain why procurement is so important, why it is important to know everything and anything about the spend, and why procurement is uniquely positioned and qualified to extract more value out of that spend. Unless you have that, it doesn't matter what you do, something is going to fall through the cracks and it'll become very painful. And then, you're stuck on an island. And so I'd say the first thing is create alignment. And then the second thing is once you have that alignment, is to create a vision. Procurement is not a sprint. It's not 6 months, as I said earlier, and done. Create vision and think about it again. People, process, technology. What people do I need? What team do I need? What capabilities do I need? What diversity do I need in my team? And then the second thing is what process, what operating model do I require? How should I structure myself? What mandate should I have? How do people need to come and interact with me? Like have a real clear, like a RACI almost. I don't necessarily love always RACI, but have a clear, responsibilities and accountabilities, and like who owns what. Procurement doesn't have the D of decision of selecting suppliers, but we sure have the responsibility and accountability for the competitive process and extracting value. So that, and then think about technology. It's out there, right? I mean, you have end-to-end platforms that allow you to digitize your business spend management. So that's how I'd like to think about it. And I'm sorry, Amber, I know you wanted to chime in as well.
No, I agree with everything you said. And I mentioned this before, but the involvement early in the process and showing your stakeholders that you can, provide insights and help that process going forward, I think is also key. It doesn't really matter where you are in that procurement maturity, that's going to be one of the sticking points that you want to emphasize with your stakeholders.
So would it be fair to say if we think about it from a people, process, and technology standpoint, it's really outlining the people and process side, like understanding who's involved, how should this work, and then leveraging the technology to help enable that versus the other way around.
Yep, could not have said it any better.
And Michael, I know you had some material that you'd like to be able to wrap up with. I'll hand the floor to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott. Look, the way we'd like to think of this is like, what are some of the key takeaways? This was great. Amber, great job. Michael, thanks for the insight, 30 minutes. But what should I be taking away? And so the way we'd like to think of this is to think of it from the, ask yourself a couple key questions. And the first thing that we highly encourage you to think about as you listen to this webinar is, what do I know about my strategic suppliers? What do I know about ownership structure, financial performance? Where are they going? What's their 3 to 5 year journey? Are they investing, divesting? Are they acquiring? How are they showing up in the sentiments from a news perspective? How are they doing? What do you know? Really important. The second thing that I'd like to think about is, do you have full end-to-end spend visibility? What do I know about spend under contract? What do I know about my total addressable spend? And do I know exactly how much of that I currently am managing? Really important. The third thing that we'd like to mention here is, have I optimized my tech landscape? What do I have from a sourcing perspective? What do I have from a contracting perspective? And do I have point solutions, or do I have everything in one single integrated platform? Really important. And is technology an enabler for you, or is technology actually a blocker? If it's the latter, you may want to think about that. How much risk do you have across your supply chain? And when I say risk, or when we say risk, it's not just risk of performance. It is also things like financial risk, environmental risk, reputational risk. Of course, cyber has been a really hot topic lately, but it has always been important. What do I know about risk in my supply chain? And then the last thing, and this is in no particular order, so please don't think that these are from 1 to 5 in terms of importance, is, do you have the right talent? Do I have the right people? Do I have the right skill sets? Do I have people with soft skills, emotional intelligence? Do I have that in my environment today? If the answer is no, you definitely need to think about that. So with that, I know we're at time. We are going to share 2 interesting documents with the audience. The first one is our 2021 benchmark report. It allows you to think about what best in class looks like from a procurement perspective, what metrics you are able to achieve by fully digitizing your end-to-end business spend management process. And the second thing is an ebook that talks about the 4 stages of procurement maturity. It gives you more depth around people, process, technology. We welcome the conversation. We love talking about this stuff. And so with that, we wanted to thank everybody. If you want to continue the conversation, please reach out to Amber or to myself. Amber is the brains of procurement, I always say. So please reach out to us, and we thank you for your time and attention.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Amber. This has been extremely insightful, and appreciate your time today in joining us for our first Elevate 21 conference. So thank you again. Hope everyone's enjoyed today's session. And again, if you have any other questions or wish to continue the conversation, please do feel free to reach out. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.